All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. May the 4th be with all y'all. So I'm here today to talk about Tales from the Dark Side. Is this on? Oh, we're good? Can you guys hear me? Oh. Huh? What? We're going to talk about Tales from the Dark Side. So today's agenda, we're going to go over the intros real quick. I do have some giveaways, which we'll talk about. So for those that just came in, if you'd like to participate in the giveaways, on a piece of paper, please just jot down your name, email address, and a phone number. And I'll have some raffles and some giveaways, which I'll talk about here, right? So a quick introduction about myself. My name is Quan Nguyen. Please feel free to call me Q. I work for a company called Crowdstrike. My mission right now is to help companies like yourself stop breaches. I've been with the company a little bit over 4 years now. Prior to that, I worked at a legacy AV company. And then prior to that, I delved in the industrial data communications, messing with routers and switches and networking tables. And then also one of my other missions right here, I am the vice president for Party for Life. It's a nonprofit organization that benefits St. Jude's, and we throw a gala every year. So that's one of my other missions in life here. So who wants swag, right? As I mentioned, we are doing a raffle. So just, again, jot down your name, phone number, email address on a piece of paper, and I'll have about 4 or 5 raffle questions. And then throughout the presentation, I'm going to have some random questions, and then whoever will answer them correctly can win this Crowdstrike tumbler here. Keep your coffee hot and your drinks cold. So for the raffle, there's 2 winners. The most correct answers will win. And in the event of the tie, we're just going to go to a drawing. Really simple, right? So let's start first. Your first raffle question, right? What % of breaches occur through identity compromise? Is it A, 20%, B, 40%, C, 60%, D, 80%, or E, 95%? Yeah. And then for those that are just joining, these are raffle questions that you could participate in to win one of 2 Monopoly, Crowdstrike branded Monopoly games, right? So just jot down on a piece of paper again, your name, email address, and a phone number. And then this is the first question, right? And then I can always come back to this before I collect the answers in the interest of time here. All right, so we're going to start now with some Tales from the Dark Side, right? Following this Star Wars theme. All right, so we're going to start with some more swag. So for a tumbler, who can give me an example of a fileless malware attack? Anybody?
What do you say?
Fileless malware attacks? No one?
Evil Jinx virus.
Pardon?
Evil Jinx malware.
That's not fileless, though. I'm looking for an example of fileless malware attack. Going once? Going twice? No? Okay. Exploit kits. Anybody ever seen phishing? Phishing attacks, right? That's a fileless malware attack. They're gaining entry into your environment by sending them a spear phishing attack. There's no malware involved. AVs cannot detect spear phishing, right? It's just a click that you click on, right? Another example, fileless ransomware. Once an adversary has gained entrance into your organization, they can run easily a PowerShell command that will encrypt your hard drives, right? How does AV or EDR pick that up? It's very hard to. And then finally, stolen credentials. How does AV deal with stolen credentials? How does EDR deal with stolen credentials? Can you detect that? Chances are they can't, right? These are some of the main entry points for my friends, the adversaries. So if you look here at the trends, adversaries are moving beyond malware to gain initial access and persistence, right? And you can see that number goes up exponentially. When I started at Crowdstrike, it was only 39%. Fast forward to last year, according to the Global Threat Report, it's up 71% now, right? So if you look back 5 years ago, AV was the biggest and greatest thing. You had to have AV. That's not the new norm. What's the new norm? EDR, right? What's the next new norm? XDR, right? It's always evolving. Why? Because we are evolving. Us bad guys, we have nothing better to do than sit at home and try to figure out how to steal you guys' money. That's our main motive. How do we cause havoc? How do we steal your data? That's all we care about. Whereas professionals like you, you're dealing with security. You're dealing with patching. You're dealing with routing tables. You're dealing, hey, my printer's not working, or hey, my keyboard's not working. Can you fix this, right? We're overworked. We're short-staffed, but guess what? They're not. And they're working in tandem. So it's important for organizations like ourselves to find a trusted security partner and work in tandem with them, right? Because they will know things that you don't know, and we can educate you. So let's first talk about the e-criminalists, right? We're going to do a ransomware update. Who could tell me what e-criminal sole motivation is for a Tumblr? Who said that first? Thanks, sir. There you go. Yeah, their main motive is money, right? We also have developed new TTPs. Anybody know what TTPs stand for? For a cup? No? 1, 2, 3. TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? These are the steps that that adversaries like myself are taking to infiltrate your network, right? It's doing reconnaissance. It's trying to get initial access into your systems, right? And how are they doing it? Well, they're doing MFA spamming. They're using valid credentials. They're using automation. And they're also aware of EDR toolings, right? There's a lot of ways you can get around EDR. That's why security professionals always say, layer your defenses, right? Because if one gets through, the other one's the backup. So let's take a look here. These are 2 e-crime activists, some of my good friends, that have been in the news of late. And I'm going to focus on these 2, right? Slippery Spider and Scattered Spider. And you can see here, Slippery Spider, they targeted technology giants. And what they're doing is they're stealing their data and they're extorting them. But now they're taking it one step further. They ransomware your data, and then they demand the money. But then they got, a lot of customers got hit to it. They said, you know what, we're not going to pay you. We have backups. Go ahead, do what you want, right? As we evolve, they evolve. So they said, they brainstormed, we got together, and we said, hey, we're not getting any money for them. They have backups. How do we get around this? Well, now we go to blackmail, right? Think healthcare organizations. Anybody work with healthcare HIPAA information, right? There's a lot of fines for that, right? So now if I infiltrate your network and I steal your data and you have backups, I may say, hey, Ms. Ciso, I have all of your patient health information in my black box right here. And I'm going to release that publicly unless you pay me $5 million. Now, HIPAA fines, I think it was $3,000 to $5,000 for the first incident, and then extra, it's multiplied after that, right? So imagine if you have 100,000 patient health files that are going to get exposed to the public, right? And just say, hey, let's say that is 3,000 and then it goes up to 5,000, 10,000. That's a lot of money, right? So this is another way that they're doing this. If you work in a law firm, right? Or if you work in technology or in sales, if they infiltrate your network and they steal your customer files, are you going to want to do business with that, right? What is the cost of a breach, right? It's not only money, it's reputation. So they figured, all right, we can't get money just by, ransomware. Now we got to go after your brand, right? We'll go after your reputation because that's another way to lose money. So let's talk a little bit about Slippery Spider. So Slippery Spider was 7 London teenagers, also known as lapses, right? And what they did was they did some social engineering. They actually paid off people that worked like as call center operatives just to get their passwords, their credentials. And then they say, hey, I'll give you a couple $100, just press OK. Yeah, this is you on the MFA token, right? Because again, if you think of these low-level employees, they have nothing to lose, right? They just say, hey, you know what? This is more money I make in a week. So I'll take this, right? Just for pushing yes, right? And what did they do with this information? Well, they were able to infiltrate Samsung, NVIDIA, Okta, and Microsoft. Anybody remember this breach? It happened last year. Yep. It was all over the news, right? The majority of these attacks were identity-based. So again, they purchased the credentials and session tokens from access brokers there. And then once they did that, as I mentioned, they paid the employees to bypass the MFA. And then after that, they searched public code repositories for exposed credentials. Why? Because once they find out, or the SOC analyst would find out that this identity has been compromised, you change the password, right? But then if you are exploring all the repositories, well, guess what? That one password turned into a lot of passwords. And guess what? Those teams are overworked just like you are. So as they're resetting passwords, the adversary is going in and we're creating new passwords for new users, or we found new users in their passwords. Right? So that's a key point here, right? So let's look here. This is the kill chain for Lapsus, right? So again, we started at the home PC where they were able to gain credentials from access brokers, right here, right? From there, then they did a session token impersonation on the attacker machine. And then once they did that, they were able to socially engineer the help desk into that MFA prompt with those valid credentials. And then from there, they had the lay of the land and they were able to easily exfiltrate data. Those are my friends over at Lapsus. Next up, we're going to talk about Scattered Spider. And again, this is another e-crime activist that specialized in social engineering. Now, typically, their tactics were spear phishing, right? And they also use MFA spamming, SIM swapping, and vishing. Anybody know what MFA spamming is for a Tumblr? Yes, sir.
Over and over again. And eventually you just get fed up and hit approve.
Alert fatigue. Press that back. Right? So SOC analysts, we encounter this alert fatigue all the time, right? False positives, right? Ring doorbell. Who has a Ring doorbell here? Mine goes off all the time. I used to check it religiously. Now I just don't even look at it. That's alert fatigue. The same thing with MFA spam, right? If you're working on a huge project or you're on a call with the customer and this alert keeps coming through, you just want to silence that thing, right? So after a while, you just hit accept. Hey, I'm done with this. You know, like maybe this will go away. So that's what they did here. And then they were able to evade defenses by tampering with EDR and AV tools, right? If you have admin credentials, think of how many things you could do with admin credentials once you have access. You're able to stop a lot of services, right? And what they did here was they disabled a lot of EDR and AV services to get to their ultimate goal there. So here you could see one other thing about Scattered Spider that was really unique was they actually hacked the telco services and they did SIM swapping. Anybody heard about the T-Mobile breach recently? Right? Everyone's shaking their head. There's been a lot of those, right? So what these guys did was, I'm just going to use T-Mobile as the example, but not the exact case, but they hacked into like a T-Mobile and then they added their phone number and then that SIM, they just swapped it out and said, yeah, SIM A actually goes to me. So now if I was using this gentleman's SIM, all of his phones, all of his MFA prompt are now going to me. And that's how I was able to access his identity, right? So that's what my friends at Scattered Spider did. Now let's take a look at a real life intrusion that was actually thwarted by the Falcon Complete team, which is an MDR team. It's one of our biggest adversaries. These guys stop us dead in our tracks a lot. So first here, we got some malware execution via remote WMI, right? With user one, important to know. So the MDR, which is a managed detection and response team, they notice this execution and they say, hey, it's related to user one. You should reset this password. This looks abnormal, right? Then a little bit later, we see that same execution, right? And at the same time, we see they're going to recommend the password reset again. Now, what we don't see on the back end, right, is a couple things. And these are things that typical AV and EDR will be blind to. We see exploitation of Pulse VPN server. Anybody use Pulse VPN servers out here, or any hardware users, right? Think Barracuda firewalls, Cisco appliances. These are all hardware that you cannot install any AV tools or any EDR tools on, right? So in essence, we're blind to those type of things as a SOC analyst. After my friends exploited that VPN server, they did some AD discovery via Bloodhound, right? And then by doing this, they were able to conduct a Kerberos attack against an account with an SPN, right? Let's see here. I have one Tumblr left. Who knows what an SPN is? Nope. Okay. Service principal name. It's tied into Active Directory. It's very important to know. Okay. So now what we're doing here is if we look at this entire kill chain, after we've exploited this Pulse VPN server, and then we did this AD discovery and the Kerberos attack, we executed this malware. The Falcon Complete team said, hey, you need to change this password. There's something abnormal going on. So they did that. But now my friends are going to do another Kerberos attack against user 2 account with that same SPN, right? Now, because we have access to Active Directory, we're going to keep doing this. And at some point in time, if you don't have 24/7 monitoring or 24/7 remediation, they're going to get through, right? Because if this happens, put yourself in their shoes. Do you guys have a 24/7 SOC or managed detection and response, right? If this happens at 3 in the morning, who's stopping this for you? Things to think about, right? Something else to think about. Do my current defenses protect my organization against Kerberos attacks? Just something to think about, right? Take home, think about, discuss with your peers. We're gonna do another raffle question. How many stages are there in the MITRE ATT&CK Framework, right? So again, for those that just joined, we're doing raffles. You just wanna write down your name on a piece of paper, email address, and a phone number. There's like 4 questions, I think. This is the second one. I'll go back to the first one before I reveal the answer. So again, for the second one, how many stages are there in the MITRE ATT&CK Framework? So it's either 5, 8, 10, 12, or 14. And why do I talk about the MITRE ATT&CK Framework? Because it's very important, right? If we look at this, there's one thing that stands out, right? Valid credentials are no longer a primary attack, or no longer an attack vector, excuse me. It's the primary attack vector. According to Crowdstrike, over 80% of breaches occurred to compromised identities last year. 80% could have been stopped with proper IDP, identity threat protection, in place, right? So look at this, right? You have initial access, execution, 6 steps of the MITRE ATT&CK Framework: valid accounts, valid accounts, valid accounts, valid accounts, right? That's all from valid credentials. And then here, this is a very true slide, right? Valid credentials limited our visibility. It does. If we, again, look at the MITRE ATT&CK Framework, this is where we're starting. Oops, excuse me. I like to use a simple analogy, right? There's a lot of nice cars out there. If you go out to the parking lot and you see me walking around looking in the cars, right? I have a jimmy stick and I'm trying to open the doors, that's going to raise flags, right? If I break a window and you see me fidgeting with the steering column, that might raise a flag, right? But now if I go in there and I click a button, the door unlocks, I get in and I drive away. Will you think anything of it? No. That's valid credentials for you folks, right? As a system administrator, if I see John Doe come in and log in with the correct password, why would I not think it's him? That is the major issue that we face today, right? That is one of the biggest threats we have. So again, if we look at initial access, right, we're going to look at the increased vulnerability exploitation. We're going to look at the increased activity in the identity broker market. And this also leads to faster breakout times. Anybody have an idea of where I could buy credentials online at? Who said that first? Sorry. Good answer. Yeah, the dark web. That's the #1 source, right? You could get off Tor. You could get off a lot of the black dark webs. You could also get it off 4chan, Twitter, right? People are selling credentials. It's a good industry to be in. Access brokers. These are threat actors that specialize in credential theft, right? And they often advertise it on the dark web. And then in CrowdStrike's global threat report, oops, sorry, 112% increase year over year in access broker thefts. So the most pertinent way that people are getting access, you could see here, is from phishing, right? Phishing and spam. It's all email based. It could be SMS based. There's been an uptick in SMS, right? Who gets those weird texts all the time? Says, oh, you've won this, right? Click on this. Yeah, we get it all the time. Yep. Avoid at all costs. Brute force. You know, there's programs out there that could figure out a password within seconds, right? And then finally, as I mentioned, access brokers. Here is an example of things that we are seeing online, right? Post RDP access. Hey, I needed, this company needs to have a revenue of 100 million or more. This is something that I would post on the dark web looking for credentials. I'm looking for global admin for a Fortune 500 company, right? Reach out to me via PM and I'll provide you with my Tor and my Bitcoin, right? These are the ways that adversaries like myself are moving stealthily and undetected, right? There's this criminal underground that we participated, and oftentimes we work hand in hand. Here's another example. After I steal some credentials, my friends, we might start selling this. Hey, I'm selling full network access, domain admin for an electrical company based out of Jordan, right? With an annual revenue of 719 million. You're gonna get domain admins, NTDS, and full internal network info for the low, low price of $3,200, right? So if I invest $3,200, and this is almost $1 billion company, I think I could get a couple million out of them, right? Ransomware their environment. There's things out there, even right now, I may not know how to code. Anybody heard of ransomware as a service? Right? You go on the dark web, I could rent somebody's ransomware servers and use their tools to deploy it. And if I collect $10 million, I just have to cut them a Bitcoin for 2.5. They take 25%. Easy work for them, even easier work for me. I don't do anything. My initial investment, $3,200. And then I pay them commission, right? So it's a good ROI, isn't it? You know, anybody have an MBA? Is that a good ROI? I would think so. Again, more about this access broker boom, right? Increasing demand. You could buy a la carte or in bulk. And this is what's happening. You could go online, and if T-Mobile's passwords out there, I could say, yeah, I'll buy 10,000 of those, right? It's available for me. And it's cheaper if I buy 10,000. It gives you more entryways. And again, here, you could see access methods will always remain consistent, right? They're going to purchase it on log shops on the dark web here. And again, you could see, here's that very important stat. 80% of all breaches occur to compromised identities. And 50% of organizations have experienced an Active Directory threat attack in the last 2 years. Very important. So Active Directory is one of the forefronts and one of the battle points. Some other interesting stats here, right? Just to go over real quickly, these are the targeted sectors. And you can see where your company falls in, right? We have broken it out to academic, government, et cetera. And then we also give you the prices, right? And again, you could actually visualize what that ROI is. It's not a huge initial investment, right? But it could turn into a huge windfall of money. Okay. All right. So next, we're going to take a look at how our criminal ecosystem works, right? So you have your services first, right? We talked about that. You have your access brokers, which I just talked about. You have hardware for sales. You even have phishing kits. And where's that ransomware as a service? Crime as a service, ransomware as a service, right? That's the service that we offer. After that, after we buy the service, we got to figure out how to distribute this, right? So it's distributed via mostly 4 or 5 different ways. I talked about emails, right? You have your exploit kits, and then you could also even purchase like traffic distribution system. And that's how we move it to the host system or the victim will use. And then finally, how do we monetize it, right? There's a lot of ways we can monetize it. Ransomware, right? Wire fraud. Really cool use case. One of my friends hacked into a company, hacked into the accountants, right? She had a spreadsheet of all of her accounts payables. All we did was we changed the routing number and account number. She just goes to that, copies and pastes. She never knew. For 6 months, all that money was transferring to me until the vendors said, hey, Sally Joe, we haven't gotten a payment in 6 months. And then when we go and backtrack, she figures it out. Hey, somebody changed the routing number and the account numbers, and they were wiring that money to me and my friends, right? Very simple. How do you track that, or how do you protect against that with antivirus? You can't, right? You can't protect against that with EDR. It's just a simple file change. So there's very technology advanced ways, and then there's very rudimentary ways what we're doing it. Can you stop us, right? How do you stop us? It's very hard. You know, how many people here have been involved in a breach or know somebody that has been involved in a breach or an organization, right? I see a lot of head shaking. Some people may not want to raise their hand. It's understandable, right? But how do you stop us? Well, first thing is intelligence. Anybody play sports? Anybody Michael Jordan, Tom Brady fan here? LeBron, anyone? What do? They study game tape, right? Peyton Manning, known for a passer, doesn't run well, right? We study game tape. That's what SOC analysts need to do too, right? Because if you think about it, knowing thy enemy is half the battle, right? So here's another raffle question. Who came up with the saying, know thyself, know thy enemy, 1,000 battles, 1,000 victories? This might be a tough one, right? Just write it down if you can. Yeah, it's a raffle question. So again, it's I'll give you a hint. It's a very old saying: "Know thyself, know thy enemy. 1,000 battles, 1,000 victories." Right. And the main crux of that is athletes. They study this game tape. These adversaries, we have our habits, right? At the heart of every single attack is a human person or human persons. And as humans, we all have habits. We're lazy. That's why we write scripts, right? How many sysadmins in here write scripts to automate everything they do? Guess what? These guys are doing the exact same things. And how do I know that? We have tons and tons of data that tell us this. This is how Crowdstrike effectively correlates all their attacks to all the different adversaries that they track, because we're collecting all the tactics and techniques. And that's how they stop us. So real quick, how do you stop us? Well, first one of the main things you need to do is secure your Active Directory, right? And before I move on, the final raffle question, what was the hacking name of the 17s in London that I talked about? Right? No, it's a raffle question. Just go ahead and write it down, please, if you can, right? And I'll go over the questions again, and you can participate in the raffles before I quit. So if you want, what were the hacking name of the 17s in London? All right. So the first way is we need to shrink the attack surface plane, right? We need to reduce it. And how do we reduce that? Well, first thing is we got to look at compromised passwords. After we get initial access, typically password sprays will allow us to guess common passwords, right? And then once we get those passwords, again, it's just like I have a key to the car. It looks like me, that's my car, right? So if we try to dump some of these passwords, right, oftentimes we'll make up dictionary attacks to avoid brute force. So that's one of the ways to do it. And how do we remediate it? Well, first, you want to ensure that no users or service accounts are using credentials that have been compromised in other breaches. So again, some homework to take down. Do you have a tool that will allow you to do that? Do you have a tool that's going to allow you to check all of your most critical passwords to make sure that they haven't been compromised? The second thing, stealthy privileges, right? So these are delegated privileges to users or service accounts that are then abused to escalate privileges of valid accounts, right? So for instance, you have the ability to reset admin passwords, or you can replicate password hashes, right? And how do we remediate that? Well, in addition to traditional IGA attestations, right, we should also have the ability to escalate privilege through stealthy privileges, right? So you want to incorporate stealthy privileges. Finally, SPN hygiene. So I asked this earlier what SPN stood for. It's service principal name, right? So accounts with service principal names, they're often targeted because they're often tied to user accounts, right? So if I have a normal user account and I also have an SPN account, I don't like, again, I'm a lazy person. I don't want to have to remember too many passwords, and I don't want to use a password manager. So I'm going to use the same password 1234 for my local user account. And for my SPN account, I'm going to use password 1234 because it's easy. This is one of the main vectors, and this is why many, many companies get breached. How many of you or how many people know that a lot of these service accounts all share passwords, right? Or just think to yourself, do I share a password with any of my coworkers, right? Sysadmins, they typically do this, especially on service accounts. Service accounts will keep that same password for years and years and years, and they just pass it down. For instance, if I start working at his company, he'll be like, oh yeah, this is our service password. He'll quit. We won't change the password. Somebody else starts, I'll give it to them, I'll quit. But guess what? We still have the password. That's a liability. That's a way in, right? So moving quickly, identify accounts with SPN, remove SPN from users that don't need it, and then introduce complex long passwords. Again, we want to really shrink the attack surface, right? These are the best practices to protect your identities, right? Authenticate by inactive users, verify with MFA, verify with MFA, 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 MFA everything, right? If you don't trust it, MFA it. That's the easiest, one of the easiest ways to stop us from coming in. And then you want to follow this rule, audit, tune, enforce, implement rule, right? Always check to make sure that it's in line with your security posture here. So now going back to my raffle, I'm running really short on time here. So the first question was, again, just to recap, what % of breaches occur due to identity compromise? So for those in the back, you just want to write down your name, phone number, and email on a piece of paper, and then the answers, and then I'm going to raffle these off at the end. So that's the first question. The second question was, How many stages are there in the MITRE ATT&CK Framework? Right? The third one was who said, know thyself, know thy enemy, 1,000 victory or 1,000 battles, 1,000 victories. And then finally, what was the name, the hacking name of the 17s, right? So once you finish that, if you could just pass that on down to your right, I would appreciate it. And then, let's see here. Is there any questions before I give the answers? Any questions? No? All right, well, the answers. Oh, sorry, question? Question? Here you go. You can catch this here. So
Right.
you catch this, you can speak into the mic here.
Yeah, they have all the answers right to participate in the raffle.
The raffle, yeah, that's gonna be, I'm gonna cover that. Anybody else have a question? Is there a question over here somewhere, you said? No? All right, so here's the answers. So for the first answer, what percent of breaches occurred to compromise credentials? 80%, right? And that's according to the global threat landscape from CrowdStrike. Second question was, how many stages in the MITRE ATT&CK Framework? There's 14 in the enterprise MITRE ATT&CK Framework. Know thyself, Sun Tzu, Art of War. Highly recommend a good read there. It's a very good read, especially if you're on the SOC team, right? It's about how to go to war and how to fight these battles. And right now we are fighting a battle. And then finally, the hacking name, I'll accept either Lapsus or Slippery Spider. So again, my name is Q. I'm from CrowdStrike. We do have a booth downstairs. Please feel free to stop by with any questions. More than happy to answer you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.